Well, that was a surprise. Hey everyone, I'm Eric from Lonesome Reader, and the long list for the Booker Prize 2018 has been announced. And what a surprise! Like, there are so many titles on the list that really wasn't expecting to see there, and about half of them I've never even heard of, really. So, like, it really came as like quite a surprise, and I feel like a bit silly because like I made this video predicting some books that I thought might have been on the list. I mentioned 52 books, and only 4 of them actually appeared on the list. So, you know, like, here I was, Mr. Confident, saying like, oh yes, I think I know what's going to be on, and I really had no idea. So that goes to show you how book prizes can really surprise you of like what they're going to list, and don't always go for the most obvious choices. So there's no Alan Hollinghurst, no Julian Barnes, no Ali Smith. There's really the main author that people will have heard of and who just won the Man Booker Prize 50 is Michael Ondaatje for his new novel Warlight. So yeah, it's really intriguing, and I think it's sort of interesting how like book prizes can't really win. I mean, they're going to be criticized if a lot of like famous authors are on the list, and then if it's like a list of books that mostly no one has heard of, like they're going to be criticized too for being like too obscure. So like I'll be interested to know, like, what do you think? Do you prefer there to be like titles on a list? Are you more drawn to book prize lists where you haven't actually heard of a lot of the books before? Or do you like it when there's a list of titles of authors who you've read before and are intrigued to read more of their fiction? So let me know what you think about that. Like, I think I like a good balance, you know, of like, I want to have heard of some of the books because otherwise it can feel like too alienating. But on the other hand, like, I want to discover new fiction and books that I wouldn't have come across otherwise. So yeah, I'm quite glad that this list has a balance of that. And of course, there was like a mini scandal yesterday when the long list was announced accidentally way ahead of time. The Guardian accidentally published an article describing the long list before it was supposed to actually be announced, and the same thing happened with the Women's Prize earlier this year. So it's like it's been like quite a year for like mainstream journalism bungling up prize lists and breaking the embargo before they were supposed to announce what the books actually are. But I'm going to get into the books and give brief descriptions of the books and the ones that I'm most interested in reading now. I've actually only read 2 of the books, so there are 13 books on the list, 7 written by female authors and 6 by men. And as mentioned in that Guardian article that gave away the list, it's it's not a very globally mixed group of authors. There's mainly authors from the UK, the US, Canada, and Ireland, and that's pretty much it. One of the authors, she grew up partly in South Africa, and another one of the authors is Canadian, but she has Ghanaian parents. So it's not like hugely globally mixed in that there's no one really from the Middle East or Australia or New Zealand or Africa particularly. So yeah, it was interesting. The video I made before, Britta commented on it, and she sort of had a wish list of how she wanted to see a mix of male and female authors, which there are, and a mix of some titles that she's never heard of before, which I'm guessing there will be, and also wanted a mixture of authors from different parts of the globe, which, you know, there isn't so much, but I still think a lot of these books sound really interesting. So first I'll talk about the 4 that I did mention on my list before, and one which I just read called The Water Cure by Sophie Mackintosh, which is a debut novel, and I love this novel so much, so I was so excited to see it on the list. It's about the lives of 3 sisters growing up on an isolated island. It's a sort of dystopian type landscape. You feel like there's been some major disaster in the world. There's like a threat coming from outside, and that sounds quite generic, but it's done in such a beautiful, interesting way that really gets into like the difficulty of family and gender in a really unique and interesting, striking way that's also poetically written and just like a beautifully told story with a lot of surprises along the way. So I really highly recommend that. And also, the only other novel I read on the list is From a Low and Quiet Sea by Donal Ryan, another Irish author. There's a good, like, strong Irish contingency in this long list. And this is a novel about three different characters. One is a asylum seeker from Syria, and two are Irishmen growing up in a small community. And it's about how their lives intermingle. And it's just written in the most beautiful way. As I said before, I think Donal Ryan is like one of the best writers working today. His writing is just so powerful. And I'm not going to give much about the story away, but this story is so impactful. And also, it begins with a father telling his child a sort of like fable about how trees communicate with each other. And Ariel Bassett made a whole video review about this book and wrote a poem sort of talking about the language of trees. And it's really like funny and coincidental because another book on the list, which a lot of people have been talking about recently, is The Overstory by Richard Powers, which is also a novel about trees. And features a part of the story apparently features I haven't read it yet, it's a very long novel, but a part of the story features about how a scientist sort of discovers how trees communicate with each other. And the novel is about the history of the United States, sort of told almost through the perspective of the trees surrounding these events that are going on. So it's just sort of funny that both of these novels feature as the theme of them how trees have this language and communicate with each other, which I never heard of before. Before I watched this documentary at the end of last year with Judi Dench, the actress Judi Dench, she loves trees, and she was going around with this tree scientist talking about all about the secret lives of trees and how trees sort of communicate with each other through this fungus underground between their roots. It's like really crazy stuff. So next on the list is the choice that a lot of people would have predicted, which is Warlight, Michael Ondaatje's new novel. And this is a story about two children after World War II who were raised by a strange man named Moth, who might be a criminal, and how when their mother eventually returns, it comes without her father, and about the mystery of like what happened to them and why the children were left to be raised by these curious people, which does sound like a really intriguing story. So this might be my first Michael Ondaatje novel that I read. And then next on the list is Sally Rooney's new novel called Normal People, which I hadn't listed because I think I just like I thought maybe it was being published after the cutoff date. It hasn't been published yet. It's going to be published in the UK, going to be published at the end of August. There's two books on the list which haven't been published yet. And so Sally Rooney's new novel is one of them. And I had read her other novel, Conversations with Friends, which I really admired, which it took me a while to come around to the style of this novel, but in the end, I really liked it. And so she's a really striking new writer. And this new story is about two girls who grow up in the same part of rural Ireland and who come from very different economic circumstances. And then how when they go to university in Dublin, they form a new kind of bond with each other because they're sort of on the same level now. So Sally Rooney is someone who writes really intriguingly about modern Ireland. And then next on the list is Everything Under by Daisy Johnson. And I've read some of Daisy Johnson's short stories before in this book called Fen. Really intriguing, like fable, sort of fairy tale. I can't speak, like fairy tale like stories, but that are about sort of modern life and really serious themes. I just sort of like forgotten that she had a new novel out, and I'm really intrigued to read it. And also I think this has the most beautiful cover on the list. Like, let me know what you think, but it's just such a gorgeous cover. And intriguingly, I think this novel was originally called Eggtooth, but I guess they wanted to make a title that wasn't quite so strange. And so this is about a young woman named Gretel, so it's gonna continue on with a sort of like fairy tale type theme. And Gretel was very close to her mother when she was younger, and they even like developed their own language together. And then many years later, she becomes estranged from her mother, and she works as a lexicographer, updating the dictionary. And it's about her discovering what happened to her mother and going back to her home. And so I think it's gonna have that sort of like fable-like feel, but also be a lot about like language and the way that language sort of defines our lives. And then next on the list is another novel called Milkman by Anna Burns, another Irish author. And this is a book that I actually have, and I hauled it a while ago, and it sounds really intriguing. It's about a girl in a family who I think she has a large family, and she's largely gone unnoticed. But then she takes a lover, and she suddenly becomes very conspicuous in her family, and it's about the consequences of treading that line between sort of going under the radar and then being very conspicuous and standing up for what you believe and what you want in life. And so I think this sounds like a really intriguing novel that's also about the Troubles in Northern Ireland. And then next on the list is In Our Mad and Furious City by Gunaratne. And this is about three boys growing up on a local council estate in London, and who have their sort of like normal interests in football and girls, but one of them develops an interest in religious extremism, and it's about sort of the consequences of that. And I think it's written in a really different, like, modern style. And I'd heard about this novel, but I'd been kind of hesitant to read it because I read a really mixed review of it, and that just sort of put me off a bit. Though, like, the themes of it sound like what I would be interested in about sort of modern English life, but then it feels like it like is approaching them from sort of obvious ways of talking about like marginalized boys who develop an interest in religious extremism. It sort of feels like a story that has been like told a lot before, but maybe not. Maybe I'll be surprised by it. Then there is The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner. This is a novel about a woman who has been imprisoned and who's going to serve a long sentence, and she's sort of thinking about the life that she's blocked away from, that's like just outside the prison walls. And then she finds out some news which makes her decide that she wants to change her destiny. So it's about sort of the prison system in America and the dramatic story of this woman. And then there is Snap by Belinda Bauer, which is a crime novel, which has a blurb on the cover of it from Val McDermott, who is a crime writer, and who is also one of the judges on the Booker Prize. So it's, I guess, not a huge surprise to see this on the list. But like, you could be sort of like jaded about that, but like, I think it's kind of nice actually that the prize does draw in these judges who work in different genres and different parts of the literary community, to bring in these titles which probably wouldn't have been recognized or taken seriously otherwise. And so this is a novel, Snap is a novel about three siblings who are left by their mother one hot morning. And the eldest boy, who's only 11, is left in charge of his two younger sisters. And then the mother doesn't return. And so years later, he's still trying to care for them. And then they gradually uncover what happened to the mother when she abandoned them. Then there is Sabrina by Nick Drosso. This is a graphic novel, so it's another style of novel which we don't usually see on the Booker list. And this is a novel about a woman named Sabrina who disappears, and a man in the US Air Force who tries to uncover what happened to her, and develops all these conspiracy theories about what happened to her and people in her life surrounding her. And I think it sort of is about the line that is tread between paranoia and reality, and that sort of difficult line of like understanding what's actually happening in the world and what we're just imagining is happening, which does seem like a very like relevant theme for like the world today in deciphering between news and fake news. There is The Lawn Take by Robin Robertson, who is a poet, and this is a novel which is written in a very poetic style. And it's described as a noir written with the intensity and power of poetry, and it's about a veteran who feels like he can't return to his hometown. So he travels from city to city in America, and he sort of observes American life throughout a number of years and the changing landscape of America with its racial tensions and inner cities collapsing. And finally, there is Washington Black by S.A. Adujan, and this is a novel which is a portrait of slavery, and it's told through the perspective of a man who's a gifted artist and scientist, but who is himself just treated as a piece of livestock. And the author of this novel, who is Canadian, has been listed for the Booker Prize before, and I think this is like one of the novels on the list that I think sounds the most intriguing, that I'm most like drawn to reading, because it just sounds like a really good immersive story. But it's quite long. I think it's like over 400 pages. So it's another like chunkster, but it's one that I might want to just like get in and dive into. But let me know what you think out of all these books. Like, what do you think sounds the most intriguing, and what are you drawn to reading the most? I'm not sure if I can entirely commit to like reading the whole long list, but there's definitely like a number of books on the list that I'm really intrigued to get to and that I want to read. So we'll see how it goes. On September 20th, the shortlist will be announced. So we sort of have until then to read a lot. And then the actual winner will be announced on October 16th. So we'll see how it goes. I'll update you on my reading progress, and let me know your thoughts on this and how you get along with some of the books if you choose to read any of them. And yeah, here we go with Booker season. So happy reading, everyone.